Hello there, namaste. So this is KDR. I'm just going to use that instead of trying to say the name again. KDR, the epic story of medieval India's greatest king. And I'm splitting this into 2 parts, so this is part 2 of it. Yeah, let's just get into it.
KDR returned to the palace in a restless state, and so he turned to the imperial diaries of his predecessors for guidance. The diaries of former Emperor Sulliva Narasimha left a particularly strong impression on KDR. See, Narasimha identified 3 fortresses that were necessary to ensure the empire's continued prosperity and safety: Raichur, Mudgal, and Udayagiri. Capturing these forts became KDR's next goal. Quick note: despite these grand military aspirations, KDR remained a disciplined administrator who, as Portuguese and Persian writers point out, was deeply engaged in all affairs of the state. Udayagiri Fort was first up, and it would have to be taken back from the arrogant ruler of the Gajapati kingdom of Orissa, Prataparudradeva. Prataparudradeva ruled over a vast stretch of land, with the southern territories of his kingdom encompassing the Krishna River Delta and further down, formerly belonging to Vijayanagara. But this wasn't just some ordinary piece of territory. It was arguably the most agro-rich region in the subcontinent.
There we go.
And therefore a point of serious contention. The thing is, he also seethed with an intense hatred for KDR. One simple issue fueled this animosity: caste. See, Prataparudradeva was born a Kshatriya, and there was no question as to his innate right to kingship. Meanwhile, KDR was born to a Shudra father and a lowly servant mother. Narasanayaka's rise to power as an army commander and KDR's own enthronement makes it clear that caste
Whatever happened to the true-born son? Are they going to bring him up, or did he just disappear through history? I mean, hopefully nothing bad happened to him, and that's his nephew. But yeah, see, that's what I mean. It's like that person thinks he belongs on the throne because he is of true blood. Ugh, that whole blood mindset.
Occupation in South India was fluid, but in other parts of India, there were limits on that fluidity. Some, like the highborn Prataparudradeva, saw KDR as a lowborn usurper of the southern throne. In fact, Prataparudradeva was so arrogant that he deemed it below his social standing to engage at all with KDR, and referred to him by the insulting epithet Dasiputra, or son of a servant girl. And so KDR salivated at the prospect of not only winning back old territories, but also proving himself superior to the high caste Prataparudradeva. Soon enough, he launched a campaign against the Gajapati kingdom, starting with the Andhra territories that were taken from Vijayanagar decades before. As KDR slow-rolled through Andhra, he built alliances with local lords who had sworn fealty to the Gajapati kingdom. He convinced them to peacefully rejoin the Vijayanagar Empire. The remaining holdouts, the fortress cities of Udayagiri, Kondavidu, and Kondapalli, were sieged and eventually conquered. Notably,
So I guess the only, because they talked about how at the very beginning how he's this great king, how he did this or great emperor, I guess. He did all this great stuff. He built an empire. I guess his only shortcoming, like he was wise and all that, because but he has a short temper. I think that's his only fault, because you can't be perfect and not have a fault, because yeah, you just can't be perfect and not have a fault. We all have faults. So yeah, it's they really focus on that, and it's what leads to all the battles, because there's probably other ways of finding peace, but he's a soldier at heart. He's a combatant who never lost a battle. So he goes into it with the mindset of just constantly being victorious.
Prataparudradeva himself attempted to break the siege of Kondavidu with a large Gajapati force, but the battle ended in a provisional victory for KDR. The brave warrior caste Prataparudradeva fled for safety, leaving his son, Prince Virabhadra, stuck in the fort. The prince was captured and became KDR's prisoner. According to the historical record, KDR visited the captured prince in an effort to be amicable. As the prince was renowned for his swordsmanship, KDR asked if he could demonstrate his skill by sparring with one of Vijayanagar's own expert swordsmen. The prince was aghast. See, the Vijayanagar swordsman was a man of humble birth. Prince Virabhadra was so insulted that he grabbed a dagger from the belt of the nearby guard and plunged it into his own heart, apparently a preferable outcome to sparring with a low-caste warrior. All this caste hatred shook KDR to his core. He was not satisfied with merely taking back Andhra. No. He wanted to punish Prataparudradeva and his family
for their disrespect, of thinking themselves better of the rest. See, I guess that's the benefit of having someone who's a product of a melded, not culture, but melded caste, as it were. And he views the world in a different light, kind of like those who are of mixed blood view the world in a different light than those who see themselves as pure. The issue with seeing yourself as pure is you refuse, again, just like the whole people who are like the woke culture in the US, refuse to accept any other mindset other than their mindset, their right mindset, just like those who believe themselves pure refuse to acknowledge really anyone that isn't pure, or the fact that they see themselves as better than everyone else because they're pure. As bizarre as that sounds, because nobody in the world is pure or has a pure bloodline. I mean, the closest you could get to a pure bloodline would be the Amish. That's because they're it's interracial relationships, because it's a very small community and they keep it in that very small community, that a lot of them deal with like mental disabilities and things like that, or a few abnormalities in growth and things like that, just because, well, we weren't created to interbreed with our own family. We were created to you could see it basically just through the genealogy, that we are here to grow, to and meld with everyone. But yeah.
For their arrogance. Though Timurasu advised him against it, he prepared for an invasion of Orissa. Again, diplomacy and cleverness won the day. With the help of Timurasu, a cunning ploy was devised. To create paranoia, KDR sent a chest full of treasure to each of Prataparudradeva's most loyal Orissa lords, thanking them for rendering service to the Vijayanagar Empire. As expected, the chests were discovered by Prataparudradeva's spies, who thought that they'd uncovered a rebel plot. Prataparudradeva was tricked. He falsely believed that his lords had turned against him, and so he fled from his capital in the middle of the night. KDR marched on Cuttack and conquered the Gajapati kingdom, but chose not to assimilate it into his own empire.
No.
Instead, he brokered a peace deal with the Orissa lords and entered yet another marriage alliance, this time with Prataparudradeva's daughter, who he allowed to remain in her homeland. And so the Gajapati kingdom was left as a weakened buffer state. KDR...
That's the thing. All these marriages, I mean, how does that work? I mean, I don't know. I've never understood that, because it just seems like it. I guess my big issue is like I have trouble when it comes to like communication. Like I have trouble like being on social media. I hate being on my phone. I despise, being in contact with people. I don't know why. It just feels weird. I like to be able to talk. I like to be able to talk, like, messaging, things like that. I just cannot stand. But to have 5 having to deal with like all these, like I have a set bandwidth when it comes to being able to, like, I could do this no problem. I enjoy this. I enjoy going live. It's fun to be able to communicate with you all and talk to you all in the moment, especially live. But like in person, it's like I just want to be with the one I want to be with. That's it. I don't want to spend all this time, talking to all these people. Or then there's the issue is like, oh, I spent this much time with my friend, I need to spend this much time with this friend, and everything's got to be kept balanced and equal. And it's just like, it just gets confusing. And I'm like, no. I guess it's just the way my mind works, though. I'm not a very, I can't say, I am a social person, I guess, but when it comes to like engaging in conversations, I like to be quiet. I like to be reserved. Something's fascinating. Like when I'm reacting to things, it's always fascinating to learn, and it shows my ignorance on a lot of stuff. And I don't mind because I get to learn. He who knows everything knows nothing, and he who knows nothing, well, knows everything. Because those who know nothing, literally, the rest of your life, you will always know nothing. Just like those who believe they know everything, in the end, will always know nothing because they refuse to acknowledge anything else. Again, it goes back to the people who believe themselves pure, the people who refuse to acknowledge any other mindset, or listen to it, or have a logical discussion. Like anyone who goes to like emotion immediately has already lost an argument. I've always said that, but yeah. Sorry, this is getting me opening a whole can of words because I am going everywhere. everywhere.
KDR, still undefeated, brimmed with victorious energy. After the Gajapati campaign, KDR returned to the task of imperial governance. But despite his many administrative successes, a thriving economy, a South Indian cultural golden age, peace and stability in the provinces, he could not set aside his military ambitions. Both the Mugdal and Udayagiri forts may have been recaptured, but Raichur remained in the possession of the Bijapur.
He's a conquest ruler. That's all he does is conquest. He doesn't see himself as anything other than a conquester. Like same thing with like Rome. When they had those emperors, there were some who did nothing and you don't know of them, but the ones who would conquest and conquest and conquer and conquer and conquer. And then, well, there was also the was it Nero who was the Mad King? Yeah, but it was like it's one of those things. It's you're known for what you do, and then you get a peace king, and well, their reign is never known, which is honestly, well, except their name is there, but they did nothing because, well, they did nothing. It's hard to say, but they kept the peace, and keeping the peace is probably harder because just like people need to see combat. That's why I like the gladiatorial Colosseum was there. There was something about seeing the blood. There was something about seeing the combat. I mean, that's why there's a great thing, because I always do this comparison, like the gladiatorial Colosseum. All we did was remove we still some kind of violence with like the boxing and MMA fighting and things like that, but we kind of removed the violence and just created sports, because we've always had like the Olympics, but then now we have competition, and look how people get riled up about their teams. I mean, there have been people who have lost their lives due to, well, just how some people view it. It's again barbaric, but at the same time it's just, well, life.
Or Sultanate. By taking the Raichur God, the empire would reach the apex of its glory, and KDR's legacy would be cemented. But in medieval India, war could not be waged without ample justification, so KDR concocted a rather brilliant plan.
That's very contradictory, because he's like, oh, in medieval India, they needed a reason to do things, and I'm like, well, that defeats the purpose of it being medieval, except for the fact that they're talking about blood and caste system and purity and things like that. Other than that, it seems like everything else is on the up and up. They need a reason to conquest. They need a reason to attack, and if there's no reason, that seems like a very civilized mindset, not a medieval mindset. But medieval just has to do with the time period, not the mindset. I see, that's the thing I got to change my mind on, because I think medieval, I think like more the European kind of style, the knights and things like that. But not everyone did the same exact thing.
He sent one of his trusted royal officers, a Muslim named Side Merkar, to Goa with an enormous sum of money in order to buy horses from the Portuguese. As per their secret plan, Side defected and took asylum under Ismail Adil Shah of Bijapur. Side's fake defection was followed by a friendly letter from KDR, requesting that the Adil Shah extradite the officer back to Vijayanagar so that he could be punished in accordance with a pre-existing treaty. As expected, Ismail Adil Shah refused to return Side in an attempt to assert his political authority. KDR and the double agent Side must have been quite pleased with themselves. Vijayanagar now had sufficient justification to go to war and take back Raichur. KDR marched on Raichur and sent letters to the 4 other Deccan sultans explaining the situation. He received the blessing of the other sultans. They agreed that he was in the right and even offered to assist.
What? Oh my gosh, it's such a simple plan, but the fact that he knew his enemy. He knew the fact that his enemy would respond with a letter saying no, giving him the recourse to attack. Oh my gosh, that's from the Art of War. You know thy enemy.
Raichur.
I mean, I've read the Art of War. I'm pretty sure that's been in history and things like that in other articles all around the place, but I actually took the time to read it. It's a very short read. I was always thinking the Art of War would be like this massive book on like conquest and how to pursue like battle, because people read it for like business, people read it for relationships, people read it for very like multitude of things. So I was thinking it was this massive book, and I read it, I'm just like, it's this little thing with like big print and everything, because it's more like a verse more than anything, or a simple story just all put together into one little booklet. And I'm like, this was a very quick read.
It was a coveted hilltop stronghold with 3 layers of heavy masonry. With their massive slabs of finely dressed granite, these walls were, in their own day, considered an engineering marvel. It was also well provisioned. Atop the hill was a spring which flowed with fresh water. The garrison could withstand a siege for as much as 5 years. From a weapons perspective, the fort was equipped with heavy catapults, 200 pieces of heavy artillery, and hundreds of pieces of light artillery. Matchlock infantrymen patrolled the walls at all times. Although KDR had his own cannons, he chose not to deploy them in penetrating the rampart walls.
No.
Instead, he engaged a regiment of his Muslim soldiers to lead the vanguard in dismantling the outer wall with pickaxes. These soldiers were given cash incentives for each stone they pried from the wall, ensuring that this difficult, bloody work would continue despite heavy casualties. In approaching the wall, many lost their lives due to defensive cannon and musket fire. This continued for 3 long months. Finally, in the summer of 1520 CE, Ismail Adil Shah arrived from Bijapur with a formidable army and thousands.
Yeah, because I gotta say, because when I think medieval, I don't think cannon and musket fire. But looking at the time, oh my gosh, yeah. But the fact that they went with pickaxes and that they bring back a massive stone. But then again, how many people turned on their own neighbor to take out their life just to claim the stone for themselves? I mean, if there's a huge pot of gold that they could probably live off of on them, well, they could easily just take it from their neighbor. Take their stone, hide. As soon as one walks away with a stone, you take them out, take the stone, return it, claim the gold.
Of artillery pieces. He encamped on the north bank of the river. The arrival of Ismail Adil Shah forced KDR to turn his attention away from sieging the fort and towards the encamped Bijapuri forces. There are a few different narratives describing the battle. One narrative, by the Persian writer Farishta, explains that Ismail Adil Shah had partied so hard before the battle that he mounted his elephant in a drunken stupor and ordered his men to cross the river on rafts. Ismail Adil Shah plunged his own elephant into the river and led his troops towards the Vijayanagar forces, who slaughtered the vulnerable Bijapuris easily. But the Portuguese narrative is believed to be more accurate, and it makes no mention of inebriation. Instead, the Bijapuri forces under Ismail Adil Shah are said to have crossed the river at first light on a Saturday morning. KDR immediately ordered that his own forces advance to meet the enemy. Since there was only one small ford by which to cross, soldiers on both sides were forced to funnel into a narrow strip of the flowing river. Ismail Adil Shah planned for this exact scenario. Using his advanced gunpowder weaponry, he ordered a relentless barrage of musket fire and cannon fire onto the funneling armies. Vijayanagar soldiers were slaughtered en masse. All this carnage caused confusion among the Vijayanagar troops. Ismail Adil Shah used the opportunity to charge in with his elephants and cavalry. Shocked and disrupted by the Adil Shah's maneuver, the Vijayanagar army began to flee. When KDR...
It was all an act, wasn't it? Because if the tale from one is said that he died in the river, most likely it was a trap to lure them into the river. Smart tactic, because if this one's seen as the more accurate one, it probably seems more planned out. Because who would literally, let's face it, people who drink do dumb stuff. So who knows? Who knows?
Saw his men fleeing. He rode out before his ranks and shouted, "We all die one day, one way or another. Let us meet fate boldly and find death in battle like our heroic fathers." The Adil Shah may boast that he has slain the greatest lord in the world, but never that he vanquished him. KDR then took a ring from his finger and passed it to one of his pages so that it could be shown to his queens as a token of his death. He turned again to his armies and reared his steed. "Now, who ranges himself with me?" With this rallying call, KDR charged into the breach, and his captains, inspired by the fearlessness of their emperor, joined his side. This rallying cry changed the tides of battle, as the Bijapuris did not expect the Vijayanagar forces to regroup so quickly. And so the surprised Bijapuri troops broke rank and were in disarray, many of them leaping into the river to save themselves, while others were torn into pieces by KDR's war elephants. The scene was gruesome and bloody. Drowning soldiers, mutilated bodies, directionless animals. In the midst of all this, a Bijapuri lord, Asada Khan, sensed imminent defeat and rallied to the Sultan. He shouted, "Sire, if you wish to live, follow me." Then he lifted Ismail Adil Shah onto an elephant and helped him escape. Whether out of compassion or not, KDR commanded his troops to stand down and allowed the Bijapuris to flee for safety. Then he crossed the river and marched into Ismail Adil Shah's abandoned camp. But instead of pursuing his enemies further, KDR committed to capturing Raichur Fort quickly. Too many who were not to blame have died here today. If the Adil Shah has done me wrong, he has suffered enough. He returned to his original seat.
But one tale says that man died in the river. So how did he end up dying later on? Which I guess is why they say that this one's more accurate, because it claims that he died in the river when apparently he didn't.
Siege positions, but the previous strategy, using pickaxes and crowbars, wasn't quite working. How fortuitous then that KDR was soon greeted by a Portuguese nobleman and his band of 20 sharpshooters. This group of foreigners was on their way to Vijayanagar to sell horses. Always the gregarious and curious host, KDR welcomed the Portuguese noble, a man named Krishnadevaraya de Figueiredo, and gave him tents close to his own quarters. KDR took much pleasure in meeting these foreigners. They became fast friends. Then one day, Krishnadevaraya asked to see the fort more closely so that he could better understand the siege. Krishnadevaraya explained, "The whole business of the Portuguese is war. Letting me go would be the greatest favor that you could do upon me." KDR sent some soldiers to accompany Krishnadevaraya to the siege trenches. Krishnadevaraya discovered a glaring weakness. The fort defenders moved freely along the ramparts. See, the defenders had never faced a weapon that could reach far enough to hit them, but it just so happened that Krishnadevaraya had that weapon in his possession. Meet the Indo-Portuguese matchlock rifle, an innovative combination of Turkic, Portuguese, and Goan Indian engineering and craft.
They're going to end up surrendering. They're going to have to. I mean, you use sharpshooters to start picking them off, and all they can do is just randomly walk around. There's no real guards on the garrison. That'll just lead panic because they don't know where the shots are coming from, or they can't retaliate. Soga King.
Craftsmanship. With these new long-distance, high-precision weapons, Krishnadevaraya and his snipers could pick off the defenders with ease. Krishnadevaraya split his musketeers into 3 companies and popped any defender who dared show himself at the ramparts. Once again, KDR sent his soldiers with pickaxes and crowbars to break down the walls. But this time, the cover provided by Krishnadevaraya's men meant that the work would go unharassed. Frustrated and confused, the Bijapuri captain of the city briefly stuck his head out above the parapet to assess the situation, revealing himself. Krishnadevaraya himself sent a musket shot screaming through the captain's skull.
Dang.
The very next day, the fortress was...
That's some amazing sharpshooters if they're able to pick them off. I mean, then again, I guess they would peek out and look for a period of time before ducking away. So it gave them time to line up a shot. But like when you have to keep into mind, because they didn't have rifling at that point in time. Rifling was developed years down the road. It's literally just a barrel. And those bullets, did they have rifling? I don't think so. I'm going to have to look that up. But those bullets would not go straight because rifling as the bullets spin. And as it spins, it gets more of a straighter trajectory to go forward. If it doesn't, because remember, it was nothing but gunpowder that allowed this roundish ball to spin through the barrel and fly out. So it's just spinning and it's going through a roundish barrel that it fit through, and it was compacted down. So it's going to go any direction it wants to. It's not going to go straight, but having the rifling helped guide it and straighten it, and especially with rechanging how the bullet's shaped and everything. But yeah, I mean, the fact that they're able to do that with their muskets, they truly knew their weapons.
Was surrendered. No civilians were killed, and KDR even gave provisions to those who wished to leave the city. With this victory, KDR had established himself as the most powerful leader in the subcontinent, and one of the most powerful in the world. He returned to Vijayanagar bolder than ever. In the wake of the Raichur campaign, KDR spent most of his time and energy on managing his extensive empire. He completed many public works projects, built new cities and markets and temples and gardens, and successfully navigated both political and economic challenges. Vijayanagar was stable and it grew more and more prosperous by the day, but KDR made 2 mistakes that set the stage for Vijayanagar's later collapse. Number 1. After his defeat at Raichur, the Adil Shah dispatched his ambassador to negotiate a settlement. The ambassador's exchange with KDR was recorded as follows. "My master believes you to be the most powerful king in all the world, and one possessed of much justice. But since you broke the peace without reason, he requests that you return his artillery and tents, his horses and elephants, and his city of Raichur." KDR replied, "I would be happy to return everything to the Adil Shah, under one condition. He must come here and kiss my foot." Ismail, a upon receiving this message, jokingly responded that he would be willing to kiss KDR's foot, but he could not do so since it was impossible to enter enemy territory. KDR flew into a sudden fit of rage, perhaps because it was unreasonable for the Adil Shah to make such a bold initial settlement request anyways. He swept through the enemy kingdom and plundered several of its major cities. Finally, he arrived in the old Bahmani capital of Gulbarga. There he found the imprisoned descendants of the former sultan. Hoping to play kingmaker, he raised up the eldest son onto the throne as a puppet. This move gave the other Deccan sultans pause. KDR proved that he was willing to interfere with their internal politics and destabilize them, and in doing so, he made the Vijayanagar Empire a target for all the sultanates. Number 2. In 1523 CE, when KDR was in his late 40s, he began the succession process early by handing over the reins of power to his young son, Thirumalaraya.
Again, what happened to his nephew? We know that he took the throne. We know that eyeballs of a goat were in place of his own. But what happened to his nephew, the one who was supposed to be sitting on the throne? I'm curious. I'm really curious.
This move was necessitated due to the threat posed by his scheming son-in-law, Ramaraya, who wished to take the throne for himself. And so KDR crowned his son while making himself the prime minister. Thus, he could provide guidance as his son grew into the role. But during the 8-month period before the official coronation, the crown prince fell ill and died, likely of poisoning. And suddenly, accusations were being hurled at KDR's beloved Timurasu. KDR was inconsolable. Instead of considering the accusations more carefully, he accepted that Timurasu was to blame. He imprisoned Timurasu and several of his family members, all of whom were politically influential, and blinded the old minister with an iron rod. Big mistake. For in the end, it appears that Timurasu was innocent. According to popular accounts, it was Ramaraya who was responsible for both poisoning the boy and starting.
Well, duh. Well, of course, they made him draw him but he was the one who was bypassed for the throne. He wants it. I mean, I guess he's the firstborn. Yeah, he wants the throne. So, of course, he's going to take out his own brother because he just sees him as an obstacle.
The false accusations. With a dwindling number of loyalists in his court, and without a well-trained heir to fill the power vacuum, KDR was not equipped to prevent a Ramaraya takeover after his death. And so when KDR died in 1529 CE, he left behind an astounding legacy and a grand empire, but one that was doomed to collapse. And now you know.
Oh my gosh, that's fascinating.
If you'd like to learn more about the Vijayanagar Empire in general, I have an older video that covers the entire empire.
That is absolutely fascinating. I mean, that's the thing is history is the reality is stranger than fiction. To know that this kind of stuff, like Game of Thrones, is like a story that talks about all this stuff, and it's like, oh my gosh, that's happening. Oh my gosh, that's happening. Oh my gosh, that's happening. And then you look at history like this, and it's just like, that stuff is nothing but reality, just told in a fantasy dynamic. And it's just like, I know people got mad at me when I was talking about PS1, and it's just like, well, I'm just relating it to what I'm aware of. But it's fascinating because history is so barbaric. Human beings are such monstrous creatures. We just try to hide that and try to act better than we are. We try to use morals to guide ourselves to be better than what we are. But oh my gosh, we are problematic. We are problematic. But yeah, that's fascinating. KDR, much easier to say. But yeah, learning about him. I've definitely split this into 2 parts. There's no way I've let this go because I've been recording for an hour. I talk way too much. This is like a 30-minute video, and I talked for half of it, I guess. But yeah, I mean, it's fascinating to go and realize just how things have changed. Like, what was the phrase? The more things change, the more they stay the same. Yeah, it's just because if people grow and adapt, and then like the caste system just turns into something else, or the what is it? The blue blood mindset, even though that's still kind of a thing, just turns into something else. The mindset just changes a bit to where it's like, oh, my ideology is more important than yours. If you don't agree with me, well, you're a bigot, you're this, you're that, you're this. You don't deserve an opinion, you don't deserve a voice. You know, that kind of thing. The world changes, but it stays the same. The mindsets we're human beings. We fail big time when it comes to trying to grow and learn. I mean, heck, I see it in the comments section consistently. It's like, wow, some guys are very interested in what they say. Hey, and I always find that interesting because I'm like reading the comments and I'm like, this says more about them than it does about me. I don't know. Because they refuse to acknowledge the fact that I'm having a different point of view, or I have something to say, or I'm thinking something completely different based off certain topics, because it triggers different things for me because we're all different. But some people don't agree with that, and then they leave like comments about certain comments, just trying to belittle. And it's just like, in my mind, I'm like, that's not what was going on in the conversation. There's this that completely misinterpreted. But then again, I either don't speak correctly, or it's not understood correctly, or it has to do with. But that's the thing. The more things change, the more they stay the same. I'm pretty sure I insult a lot of people consistently. I don't mean to, but it just happens. People feel things differently. But yeah, I enjoy this. The history of it. I might need to see the old version, the rise and fall of the Vijayanagara Empire. Yeah, history of medieval empire, medieval India. I find that fascinating because I don't ever think of muskets at that time. I never do when I think medieval, but medieval is a huge span of time. It really is a huge span of time. There was a lot of things that changed during that time, but yeah, my mind always goes to like the Eastern Knights and things like that. For me, I think Eastern culture, and it's like Europe. Europe thinks Eastern culture, and it's probably it's funny. It always gets shifted. Just like the more east you are, every time you think west, it's just a neighbor. It just goes over a bit further. Yeah, but thank you all for watching. This stuff is absolutely knowledgeable. Yeah, this turned out to be 2 videos for sure. Thank you all for watching. Talk to you next time. Toodles.